tax would make sense. We'll then use that money to reduce this tax that rich people don't like. And that won't work either, because then the public sees the price of gasoline getting higher, and they're not getting any dividend. It's just rich people that are getting the dividend. That won't work. So we can't, we have, and the nice thing about Citizens Climate Lobby, they just say thank you very much, and they come back again the next year and they write their op-eds. They don't change their position based on what, trying to compromise with individual politicians.
So you may have answered my question. My question was, and I agree with you that a fee that's refunded equally to the public is the way to solve this issue, but there's very little political will for that. An average citizen is the place to spend their free time to work on this issue. Is it getting involved with Citizens Climate Lobby? Or are there two things or three?
Well, I think what has disappointed me a little bit about Citizens Climate Lobby is we don't get enough young people involved. It's mostly old geezers like me. It's people who are retired and have enough time to put in the time to visit Congress people and things. Although it is a good lesson in civics and things, so it's young people could learn something from it. But what was something again that I had something to say, and I forgot exactly what it was.
Bold, Nebraska?
Okay. We're not supposed to give speeches here, but does someone want to give a statement about what he's referring to, specifically about Bold, Nebraska? What will it do relative to this problem?
Well, Bold, are you going to take up the carbon fee?
Well, I'll just say real quick.
It's an opportunity to tell people what they can do to take action. We do have a voter guide up at boldnebraska.org that talks about politicians that actually care about climate change and things like eminent domain. And one of the things that we can take climate action is to stop pipelines and to stop eminent domain for private gain and standing up against things like fracking waste. If they can't get their stuff to market, they can't keep on burning it.
Yeah, you know, but the way that it was super that we did succeed in stopping the pipeline, for example, but in order to keep that tar sands in the ground, we do need this. The only way that will really happen is with the rising carbon fee, because then it becomes uneconomic. It's one of the first things that will fall off the table along with coal. Because of the high carbon content and the amount of energy it takes to get that stuff out of the ground and process it.
I have a question about the EPA Clean Power Plan. Whether or not you think it's going to be effective, and secondly, is it competing against your ideas about Citizens Climate Lobby?
Yeah, so, you know, I tried to get to Obama after he was elected, but I couldn't get the science advisor to deliver my letter to him. And this is what, you know, he could have, when he was elected and had 70% popularity and Democrats controlled both houses, could have done something, but he didn't take that as a first issue, even though national security and many things are involved in it. But yeah, it's useful to close some coal plants, but it's just relatively, you'll look, I mean, every year I update the graphs of CO2 emissions, and you're going to see the U.S. emissions are not going to change much. While, as I told you, 30% reduction if you get a carbon fee of $100 a ton. So he's just not doing the right thing, but he would have had to, at least after Democrats lost complete control, he'd have to sit down and compromise with conservatives. And we have to get enough pressure on them so that they will compromise. And that's why the court case is so important, because the courts cannot impose a solution. All they can do is say that the executive branch of the government and the legislative branch have responsibilities which the courts cannot take over, but the courts can say, come back and give us a plan which assures the rights of the young people, the same way that they told the government to come back and tell how they're going to desegregate schools or assure the rights of minorities. So the court case will put some pressure if it's won, but then we do need an effective, and I say it's just as certain as the law of gravity. As long as fossil fuels are allowed to appear to the consumer to be the cheapest energy, then you cannot solve the problem.
Dr. Hansen, I think you're totally correct on that you have to make fossil fuels expensive in order to phase them out. But the problem that I see is, what's your suggestion on how do you get people to develop the political will to do that, since our economy is based on consumption and planned obsolescence and waste? I call it the landfill economy, because when you stop and look at energy consumption, I would suggest that over 50% of it is used for wasteful purposes. If you, like our agricultural production, they say nearly 50% or more of the food that's produced is wasted. You look at our cities, and you fly across the countryside at night, you look at even rural America, it looks like a city everywhere with yard lights running while people are sleeping. 40 years ago, during the energy crisis, we had the political will to drive at 55 miles an hour because we knew it would use less energy. Everywhere you look, the whole world's economy is based on waste. And you look outside the door of the Harper Center here, you got a natural gas.
Question.
Okay, so
you got a natural gas fire and put carbon dioxide here.
Okay, well there is.
Where's the political will come from?
Yeah. So there are a lot of people on the one end of the spectrum who look at those facts and say, therefore, people should just stop consuming so much and wasting stuff. However, if you look at China and India, these people see a lifestyle that, for whether you agree with it or not, they are attracted. They want to have a personal vehicle. It seems to be almost an innate desire of people. And they want to have a higher style of living. That by itself is not the climate problem. So they're saying, well, and there are big communities, big in terms of thousands of people or something, who are trying to go back to a simpler style of life and be less consumerism. But then you've got the other half of the world who emulate our lifestyle. So the way the climate problem is an emergency, and that requires addressing the carbon emissions, and the way we're going to have to do it is a coercive arrangement where the big powers, the United States and China, essentially force the other countries to also have a carbon price. And what will happen? Because you can't tell the rest of the world not to raise their standards of living. That's actually part of the solution. There's another aspect here. That's population. We have a population which is really exceeding the carrying capacity of the planet. But if you look at the countries that have developed economically, Europe, Japan, those countries, the fertility rate is now below the replenishment level. So once the country becomes wealthy enough and the women are educated, the population problem can be solved. But we do have to let India, China, and other countries develop. And then, but it should be restrained via a carbon fee. And then, as the fossil fuels begin to be phased out, you have to replace that with an energy fee, because that will reduce consumerism. If your taxes, you do have to have taxes to run civilized nations. And I say those taxes, after we phased out the carbon, should be based on energy use, because that's what we're wasting a lot of stuff. And you can discourage that via using that as what you tax. The same way that you'll phase out CO2 emissions by making it more expensive, that's, I think, the best we can do.
I really enjoyed your talk. I have a quick comment and then if I should. Since Obama took office, solar energy electricity generation has increased 20-fold. So we have 20 times more energy from solar than when he took office. And the solar job growth rate is 10 times the national average of growth. And that's largely due because of the stimulus package and a lot of subsidies for solar and green energy. So would you say that there is a place for subsidizing alternative, like renewable energy?
Yeah, renewable energy is certainly part of the solution. Now, actually the biggest reason for the fast growth in renewables has been renewable portfolio standards, which are telling utilities, you got to figure out how to get 20% or something. It varies from state to state, and then they give special programs to households which encourage rooftop solar, for example. And my barn is covered with solar because the subsidies were good enough to make sense. Now we generate twice as much electricity as we use, but it is due to the subsidies were essential to get that. The problem, and people probably thought this renewable portfolio standard makes sense because if it gets up to 20%, then it'll start getting more and more and more. Actually, it turns out that it becomes harder as you get past 20 to 25% or so. Then the intermittency of the renewables begins to show its face and make it difficult to go to still higher amounts unless and until we find storage, affordable storage mechanisms. We don't, unless you've got hydropower. If you're in a state like Washington or a nation like Sweden or Norway, you've got so much hydropower that you can balance intermittent energies. So anyway, it's renewables, but let the market choose what the balance is among these different things. Because if you just do it by fiat, it's like Germany. Germany has just decided by fiat to do a lot of solar. Well, not solar, renewables, especially wind and solar. But their electricity has become very expensive, and their carbon per unit energy is 11 times greater than France. So they're building new brown coal-fired power plants. So they haven't figured it out, even though they've got the best engineers in the world. So it's not so easy. And I think it's great that we have a country that's wealthy enough to try to do that. The other 190 nations, most of them can't afford that. But we'll see. Let these alternative approaches be tried and compared.
If we don't do anything to stop fossil fuels from being dumped into our atmosphere, how long will it be before Earth becomes uninhabitable?
How long will it be before?
uninhabitable?
You know, if my, so the question, you know, the threat, it seems to me, the first real threat will be the effect of rising sea level if the ice sheets really disintegrate. Because if you look at a place like New York City, it's amazing around a place we live, 125th Street. Columbia University is working very hard, it's been working for 5 years, putting in enormous infrastructure. It's like about 1 or 2 meters above sea level. It's right, the Hudson River is right there, and it's not a river, it's an estuary. It's at sea level. And right above that is all this infrastructure they're putting in. You get a 5-meter sea level rise, all that money is wasted. And look at New Orleans. It has not yet recovered. And that's a village in comparison to the large global cities that are located. So I'm afraid that the way the Earth would become, that the society would disintegrate, is the planet may become ungovernable if we start getting refugees numbering in the hundreds of millions. To make the planet would not be physically uninhabitable, but because it's got a population of 7 or 8 billion, and then if the economy goes to pot, and if you know, controlling the refugees. Anyway, well, we don't want to let that happen, so we're going to avoid that with the rising carbon fee. There was a mistake in my book, Storms of My Grandchildren. I speculated that we could get a runaway greenhouse effect, and that would really make the planet physically uninhabitable. But you can't do that with just fossil fuels, because you have to get rid of the ocean before, because the ocean keeps taking CO2 out of the atmosphere, even though you're trying to pump it there with fossil fuels. The ocean is taking it out and putting it on the ocean floor on a time scale of, it's a slow process, but it's fast enough that you can't get a runaway greenhouse effect until you get rid of the ocean. And that happened on Venus, and we got rid of the ocean on Venus, and the runaway greenhouse effect, and the temperature is 700 degrees, and that's an uninhabitable planet. But you don't have to worry about that. It's not going to happen in your lifetime.
My question was, have you heard of the ITER project in France? It's the international project to create a nuclear fusion plant. It's supposed to generate 500 megawatts, but originally the plant was 1 megawatt. What do you think about it?
The question is about nuclear fusion. That nuclear fusion has always been, it's said that it's always been 50 years in the future, and it was when I was young, and it still is now. However, there is some promising research. I don't know that it's particularly what's going on in Europe, but it is one of the things that could be out there later in this century, and maybe sooner than later. But it's just not there now. But it would be. It has the potential to be a much better source of energy and preferable to fission nuclear power. So it's something that's worth investing in. And that's one of the reasons why you want to rise the carbon fee, because there actually are some entrepreneurial attempts to investigate fusion, but they would be a lot more emphasis on it and money put into it if they realized that fossil fuels were going to be phased down.
Hi, Dr. Hansen. I've been really inspired by your work, and thank you for all of your work. I marched with you in D.C. once to shut down a coal plant. I helped start the Energy Action Coalition. I worked with lots of young people around energy efficiency, renewable energy, stopping coal.
I actually came to ask a different question, but I saw Ann McGuire over there, and she didn't introduce herself. She was the chair of the Omaha Public Power District, and she led a rate restructure last year that increased our fixed fees, decreased the rate, so it shifts the cost from richer to poorer, and it discourages energy efficiency and renewable energy. So I think we need to get new people on the OPC board. About nuclear power. The nuclear power that sounds like you support doesn't actually exist yet. And, nuclear power in the past has been extremely expensive. So it seems like we have proven and lower cost energy efficiency, renewable energy, and we're moving to more decentralized grid, smaller scale, people-owned power that produces a stronger grid. So I don't understand how nuclear power fits, especially if we don't have the technology right now.
Yeah, we actually have almost 100 nuclear power plants which have provided baseload electric power and provide most of the carbon-free electricity in the United States. Much more, well, hydropower provides quite a lot, large hydro, but compared with these renewables that you're talking about, it's much larger. And it's available 24 hours a day. And what we have now is a cost structure which is strongly favoring renewable energies. They're subsidized at a rate which actually makes some utilities say, well, I'm not going to keep running this perfectly good nuclear power plant because it doesn't get credit for being carbon-free, while you give an enormous incentive, economic incentive to the renewables. Now, the fact is that if you let the prices use honest prices, no subsidies, then renewables are still much more expensive. You have to include the fact that they are intermittent, and so there are certain places and times where renewables are competitive already, but overall, they're still expensive, and I think their price will still come down more, and I think that they are a big part of the solution. But to rule out the safest form of energy that we have and demonize it the way that, for some reason, environmentalists decided to do is wrong. If you go back 50 or 60 years, some of the major environmentalists were advocating nuclear power as the energy of the future because they said correctly that the footprint of nuclear power on the planet is smaller than the alternatives. And then part of the reason that they changed their mind was some of the leading environmentalists said, oh, we don't like more energy because we would rather have a smaller population and keep the environment people free. But in any case, that will be discussed in a book that I've seen beginning parts of. But anyway, these things should all be decided by locally. As I say, I think the market should be a driving consideration. However, a democracy can choose. It doesn't have to use the cheapest. It doesn't have to let the market work. You can decide for some reason, but it needs to be a good reason. It shouldn't be based on false information. Nuclear power, it is very expensive now to build a new nuclear power plant in the United States. That's because the Nuclear Regulatory Commission made it. It takes, if you want to build a nuclear power plant, first of all, you've got to pluck down almost $1 billion to get approval for your design. And it's going to take you 15 years because the Nuclear Regulatory Commission doesn't really want to have more nuclear power plants. Well, they're being told now By the way, there's a very positive thing that's happened just in the last month, and that is that by a vote of 87 to 4, I believe it was, Democrats and Republicans supported a bill in the United States Senate which is instructing the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to learn how to approve, to assess new technologies. Right now, all they do is this old light water, 50-year-old technology. And also, they have instructed the Department of Energy to allow entrepreneurs. We have the best universities in the world, and we have the best environment for innovation in the world. We should be benefiting from that. But so anyway, this bill instructs the Department of Energy to let entrepreneurs use the facilities at these Energy Department laboratories. And I think that's a very positive step because the United States should be leading the world. They shouldn't leave this to Russia. Russia is willing to sell nuclear power plants to anybody, but the U.S. can do better.
So your models show that an extensive range of U.S. coastline as well as coastline around the globe are about to go underwater, some much more severely in the future century than in others, such as like island nations are going to go underwater, like Maldives and a bunch of other places. So would you predict that regions that are more inland, such as in the West and other regions like that, will become A, more habitable, and B, see a massive amount of gradual migration over the next century?
Well, see, I think the future is still to be determined. I think it's possible that we will succeed in making this case. I think we're getting a lot closer, both via the courts and via the politicians, to getting the actions that would phase down carbon emissions. And therefore, well, there is going to be some sea level rise even if we do that. And it's arguable whether that's going to be, less than a meter, or as Eric Grignot argues, he says, well, you're going to lose the Western Cardiff ice sheet, so then you've got 3.5 meters of sea level rise, and that's a lot. I don't know if he's right, though. I think that's still to be determined, and yeah, that's why the science is interesting, and we have to work on this. And it's still to be determined how substantial the sea level rise will be, and the range of uncertainty is very large.
Thank you.
Hi. Going back to renewables, just so right now, I know we're meeting expectations for wind and solar by large factors. I was just wondering if you think that there's going to be a significant drop in the price of the technology, just as goes on, kind of like say becoming more popular on the market and stuff, and if that's going to be significant.
The price of solar has declined enormously. The price of solar panels, of course, that's only part of the price. If you want a system, you've got to install them and things, and now the panels have become a small fraction because their price has come down so much. The actual price of the panels has become a small fraction of the total cost. So there's the potential is for really large reduction of the total cost is not so much, but the real issue there is storage. If we can come up with affordable technology for energy storage, then these things become, and of course you can use solar in many ways which doesn't require storage. So its role will, I think, continue to grow. You could even use it for making liquid fuels, for example. You don't have to, it doesn't depend on uniform solar power. So I'm not sure what the question was now. I'm not sure if I answered it.
I guess it's like if you think that it's just going to be more widespread, that we're going to develop this, like, storage and stuff.
Yeah, I think that on the long run, solar, renewables will be a large fraction of our energy if we let have a level playing field, and it will. I doubt that it's going to be the major source, but I don't think it matters that much. As long as we have a rising price on carbon that phases out the fossil fuels, then we'll let the division among the other sources be determined by what they can do.
I just like to say, after we get done playing Monopoly, all the rich people, but it might be too late by then, but for the kids' future. But my question is, we got electric cars, we got electric semis now. I've been doing my studies lately, they're coming out with electric cars. Then why can't we have electric turbines generating power instead of all these fossil fuels?
Well, the electricity has to come from somewhere. So you need a source of energy. It is, by the way, there's developments of semis.
Generating itself.
I don't know about perpetual motion machine, but there is an effort in Minnesota and Wisconsin where they're testing semis which can go 8 hours or something, which is supposed to be the limit on drivers who are supposed to drive them anyway. But anyway, now I remember the one thing I forgot to answer in the previous question. You know, what is so difficult about this is the fact that we are competing against the propaganda of the fossil fuel industry. And the most powerful propaganda on television is the "I am an energy voter," which is, some young people don't watch television anymore. They have other things. But then if you watch television, you'll see these advertisements. They're professionally constructed. They make it appear that it's in the best interest of the public in the United States to have become energy independent by means of fracking and by means of the fracking for oil in North Dakota and things. And they're saying, this is great, this is making us energy dependent from the Middle East and it's creating lots of jobs. Well, it's not they're trying to keep us hooked on fossil fuels, and they're doing a very good job of that. And how can you, the amount of money that it takes to run a campaign like that is enormous, but they have the resources to do it. And somehow we have to overcome that. That's a big challenge.
One more question, but like the greater the greater the population grows, the less resources, right? The more destruction to our ecosystem. So if we destroy that.
Yeah, well, we mentioned population earlier. If we need energy to raise populations out of poverty, and then I think population becomes a tractable problem.
So my question would be, do you believe that our efforts to halt climate change should be more focused on a transnational corporate level, especially regarding investors for coal, gas, and oil companies for the top-bottom approach, if you will, or for citizens to gather enough force/political will to act for change for a bottom-up approach, for, you propose the carbon tax being other regards like that?
I'm repeating myself, but I think you can't do it just by willpower. You have to, as long as fossil fuels are the cheapest energy, you can't solve the problem globally or nationally. So therefore, we have to make fossil fuels pay their cost to society by increasing their cost, and you can't do it suddenly in one jerk or you'll cause economic problems. But if you do it gradually over time and you do it in a way that the public will benefit and clearly understand, you do need, I had hoped that Obama would be like Franklin Roosevelt and would explain things in fireside chat, but he didn't turn out to do that, and he didn't turn out to understand this problem.
Can you comment on the Energy Department's benchmark and our funding like DARPA for energy and energy efficiency, and then also on solar thermal around the clock that can produce energy 24 hours? And then your idea of the carbon tax, why can't it offset income tax or payroll tax rather than a rebate? It would be simpler to just eliminate payroll taxes and fund Social Security with carbon tax.
Yeah, so let me start with that one. See, the problem, if you use it to offset some, that was actually tried in British Columbia. They imposed a rising carbon tax, and they used it to reduce payroll taxes. And the public liked that. The opposing party used that as the big issue in the next election, and the party in power won the election. The public actually liked this. But half of the people are not on a payroll. They're either retired or they're out of work. And so it's uneven distribution. And it's not, and there was a limit as to how high that could go. So I think that was an example of how the public can accept a carbon fee, but if you're going to let it go high enough, I think you're going to have to distribute the money to all the legal residents to make it effective. Now, what was your first question?
About ARPA and
ARPA, yeah. So our government has fell down in not funding research and development. Energy research and development gets a very small amount of money. Compared to 20 years ago, it's like a half or less. It's declined dramatically. But frankly, I don't think the government is the best place to be doing their research and development anyhow. We've become, our laboratories are not, it's not the most, a civil servant approach is not the most effective way to spend money and get research and get development. The private sector is better suited and can do it more efficiently. A good example is NASA, which I worked for decades. Now, it started out great, a very dynamic organization, very successful, getting a man to the moon in less than a decade and things. But the laboratories have become big, a few $1 billion each. And look at our getting rockets into space. Elon Musk, in the private sector, has developed a reusable thing which may be reduced by a factor of 10 the cost of getting into space, and doing it with a small amount of money in comparison to the government doing the job. So I think we're better off using the strength of our private sector, our university trainings, and our innovative capabilities, but we have to provide the economic incentives to make that work. And that means, and in the case of energy, And in the case of trying to move off of dirty fossil fuel energy onto clean energies, the best way to do that is with a carbon fee. That will really spur our private sector to solve the problem. I think they can do it much better than the government.
Last question.
Okay, last question.
Actually, this is more of a statement, and it's more of a challenge to, unfortunately, I didn't ask this get up here before, because this is more to the young people, but I'd like to challenge you to get involved politically, whatever party you choose, because the only way you're going to change that is to make sure candidates start working towards your future. That's it.
I never identified myself. It's Richard Miller, Creighton University, and I teach in the theology department. Just one note, there's this question of hope, so I teach courses on climate change and society. You might have noticed that we're in a massive anti-establishment rebellion in our politics. So there's lots of people who want system change. Systems can change quickly. For instance, whatever your politics are, the gay marriage issue changed very rapidly. A $15 minimum wage was unthinkable. Only crazy people would think that. And now California, largest state in the country, and New York have submitted to a $15 minimum wage. So don't kid yourself that societies can't change rapidly, and don't kid yourself that you can't be a part of that in an important way. Thank you all for coming.